I'd like to turn it over to Richard Peck, VP of Development and Philanthropy Services for the New Hampshire Charitable Foundation and improvisational theater enthusiast. And joining him is Ashleigh Nelson, Executive Associate.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Emily, and thank you to Joan and Michaela and Ashleigh for helping prep us for today. It's very much appreciated. A lot of professionalism at Volunteer New Hampshire, and we were just talking about that before everybody jumped on. So appreciate being here today. My title, again, is I'm the Vice President for Development and Philanthropy Services at the New Hampshire Charitable Foundation. But what you'll be seeing here in the presentation today is drawn from lots of years of work in the philanthropic world, 16 years that I've been doing this. So it's drawing from my time at Dartmouth College when I was a planned giving officer there. I'm also drawing from time where I was working at Dartmouth Hitchcock Medical Center and a little bit of my time here at New Hampshire Charitable Foundation. So again, thanks for joining us, and we'll get started. Relationship Building with Funders is the name of our presentation today. And Ashleigh's driving the bus. So table of contents here, starting new relationships. So we'll spend a little time on that, just how to meet people and how to cultivate, as one might say. Continued engagement and gratitude, maybe otherwise known as stewardship, and trying to make sure that we show appreciation in between times where we might be soliciting. And engagement methods, when to reach out. So that will be important. Just timing, cadence, asking for more, something most people are afraid of doing, but sometimes it's a very natural thing. And something that you might not see very often in presentations is my opinion of the mindset of a high capacity donor who thinks strategically. And it's something I like to talk about because it's really just saying there's a universe beyond your own nonprofit organization, the one that you might be soliciting for or working for. And there's just trying to look at it from the perspective of somebody else who might be thinking of things at a 30,000 foot view. All right, starting new relationships. So let's just start with individuals. Very important thing to think about is, how do they find you? How do people find you? So, for example, maybe they approach the New Hampshire Center for Nonprofits and say, can you help me? I'm looking for X, Y, Z. Or the New Hampshire Center for Nonprofits is proactively trying to promote your particular organization, or they may send a list out or something like that that might be helpful. So just things to think about. Again, website. Very important, in my opinion. It's kind of like the phone book of today. You used to look up in the phone book for certain situations. Now you definitely go to the website. You do a Google search and you go and find the organization. Are you easily found? There's something called search engine optimization, SEO. And that's just a fancy way of saying, can you be found? Can people find you? So when they find you, what does your website look like? Is it easily accessible? Is it engaging? Things you might want to try to do is visit your own nonprofit's website and just say, yeah, this captures me, or, maybe go in with a specific question and see if the website answers that question. One of the things is just a side note I'll say is, one time I saw this sort of a spoof on websites where it was saying, here's what the nonprofit or the business is presenting for content. And then flip to this other slide. It said, this is what people want to know. And it was things like, what is your address? What is your phone number? And very basic information. And that always stuck with me, because I just think, I wonder if we're providing things that are not of interest to people who are visiting my website versus things that people actually want to know. So things like that you can ask yourself. And there are actually very inexpensive ways and pretty templated ways to put together websites if you're struggling with yours. An article in a newspaper. This could be an opinion piece, some sort of commentary. It could be an official press release, something about your organization that might capture somebody. So you could feature a donor. You could feature somebody that you serve in your nonprofit. You could feature an officer or a board member. But those can be very captivating. People do that once in a while. Just keeps your names out there, keeps people thinking of you and thinking of your organization, and that's important. So think about ways that you can throw something out there that might be of interest. Might be a very small thing, might be very elemental in your opinion, but it could be completely new to the reader. So that's some ways that individuals might find you. Also to the right, this is something that I think is underrepresented, maybe should have a little bit more focus, is the referral. So a friend, a family member, a colleague recommending the organization, recommending you as somebody they should talk to. Why would they do that? What is it about you, the organization, that makes them feel compelled or happy to make that connection? So referrals are a huge way that we measure our success at the New Hampshire Charitable Foundation, and prior in my jobs in the past. Are people connecting other individuals to us that we wouldn't necessarily know? And that's massive. An ambassadorial type of relationship by the friend, the family, the colleague is super important. So what do your friends say? What do your family say? What do colleagues say to help make those introductions? Also, the professional advisor. Very passionate about this myself. I used to be a wealth advisor. Back from 1998 to 2005, I worked for American Express Financial Advisors. I help people plan for retirement, education planning, tax planning, insurance, cash reserves, all that kind of stuff. So you get really deep into relationships with people. You're trying to help them reach their goals. And I wish I had learned a lot more about charitable giving when I was a wealth advisor, but I've learned a lot since. In fact, just before the session today, I was talking to a bunch of wealth advisors who work with high net worth and ultra high net worth individuals, and it's amazing what they didn't know. And so it was just the way it is. But at the same time, on the flip side, what's the job here? The job is to get to know the professional advisors. If you can, get to know CPAs, go to organizational, any sort of supporting organization that the CPAs might be part of. Can you speak there? Would they give you 2 minutes? If you can't sponsor, what are ways that you can integrate and get to know them? Because they probably want to know you. They want to be at least conversant about your organization. They won't balk at the idea of hearing about what you do. It's just, how do you get to know those CPAs? And the wealth advisors, as I mentioned, they're deep into it. So are the CPAs, very deep into the relationships with these individuals who have dollars, they have money, and they would like to be supporting local nonprofits if they can. They just don't necessarily know who those nonprofits are. So CPAs can be educated, wealth advisors is educated, and trust and estates attorneys, also a huge referral source as people think about what they want to do with their estates and planning for the future. So just, I would say, give that some serious thought. How do I integrate with professional advisors who are talking to the people either that already donate to our organization or maybe would be interested in our organization? And I'll just say one last thing on this is I gave a presentation about a year and a half ago to a room full of professional fundraisers. There's probably about 32 people in the room. And the focus was exactly this: how do you get to know professional advisors? So just as a starting point, we said, how many people in the room, as a regular part of their business, proactively try to reach out and connect with professional advisors? And only 2 people in the room raised their hands out of 32. And we considered these people veteran fundraisers and very well versed in the cause and have been around a long time. Was not a part of their business, was not a part of the way they were proactively trying to reach out. And I looked at that as a huge red flag. That means that I can't say this enough. Get to know the professional advisor community in whatever way you can, one-on-one, or again, in different types of settings, because they do want to know you and they do appreciate you meeting them where they are. So there's that. Also, one thing I did forget to mention around being found around the website and knowing professional advisors, I guess I'll merge these two things together. The largest donor that the largest donation we received last year was $6 million at the New Hampshire Charitable Foundation. That came, I believe, from a combination of good information out there on the web and professional advisor referrals. So can't say enough about being good at both of those things, content, putting that out there, excuse me, and partnering with professional advisors. So talking about businesses, how do you integrate with businesses? Again, similar to the previous list, a lot of businesses are networking out there. There's chambers of commerce, there's Business and Industry Association, BIA. So these are ways that you can just go and mingle with lots of different people in settings that are many times open to members or open to potential new members. Just walking around in normal times before COVID, you could go to these places and just, again, walk around the room, have a drink, say hello, maybe have dinner with them and get to know them. And again, they'd be happy to learn about your organization. I've rarely met anybody who isn't fascinated by what different nonprofits do. So that's huge. And Rotary, I'll just jump down to the bottom there. Rotary, same thing, to have a presentation in front of a Rotary club, a local club. They're always looking for content. They're always looking for presenters. And so getting on their list and being able to speak in front of a group is huge. And even if it's not in your wheelhouse, you don't like to speak, just think of it as you might get a little nervous getting in front of a group, but I think the most important thing is maybe you find somebody who isn't as nervous, and the point is to educate and engage. And you'll be surprised what comes of that. Even if they don't come to you right afterwards and talk with you, it will stick in their minds, and you never know, you may get a phone call or an email down the road. So now I want to focus on the two in the middle there that you might not have heard of. One of the things I've found to be very much a good use of time is trying to reach out to professional business networking organizations. And I'll start with this one. I didn't list this here, but this is one I used to be part of about almost 20 years ago now. It's called BNI, Business Network International. That's where somebody can represent an organization. You could be a plumber or carpenter, you could be an accountant, you could be representing a nonprofit. You show up, and usually it's about once a week. They get together early in the morning, and the point of the group is to give referrals back and forth to each other, to get to know each person in the group, and to be able to see if they can help you and you can help them. And BNI is open to anybody who is starting out. You don't have to have any tenure. You can jump right in and be part of that group. And again, it's usually a local, in-person get together. These days, a lot of that stuff is being done through Zoom. It's still a terrific way to stay connected with people, have them get to know you, have you get to know them. So USA 500 and Provisors are more like an advanced version of that, because usually with both of these types of groups, I'll start talking about Provisors. Provisors is usually people who are CPAs, wealth advisors, trust and estates attorneys, bankers, business coaches, and so on, who have been in the business for about 10 years or more. And so they're in it usually for two reasons. One is they are obviously trying to get business. So they want to get to know as many people as possible to get referrals from them. And obviously vice versa. Their job is also to try to bridge gaps and make referrals to others. But another piece that is a little bit more subtle is sometimes people join Provisors because they want to expand their network, to know that if a client calls them and says, do you know anybody who does this? The Provisors member doesn't want to say, no, I don't. Sorry, good luck. They want to be able to say, you know what? I know the perfect person for you to talk to. And that person is so-and-so. And let me connect you through email. So a lot of these Provisors members, they're in it to build their network out so they can serve their clients better and provide some trust, get to know people and build trusted relationships and be able to make those connections. So I learned about Provisors about 4 years ago when I first came to the New Hampshire Charitable Foundation. A former colleague of mine, she used to represent in the Portsmouth, New Hampshire office, or Portsmouth, New Hampshire area. And she said, Rick, you really got to do this. You got to sign up and go. And so once a month, we get together for an hour and a half. And again, same idea. You're getting to know people. You're trying to get to know them on a personal level as well as a professional level, and be able to be as helpful as possible to them. And hopefully they'll be helpful to you. And then you get to meet people through Provisors, through specific groups, like maybe there's a bunch of lawyers or a bunch of people who deal with business transition, or women-owned businesses, or people who work specifically in estate planning. And, getting to know those people, you never know what can come of it. So that's one thing you learn about networking is you never know where it's going to go. You never know who you're going to meet. You never know who knows who and where things will land. USA 500 is virtually identical to Provisors. It's just a different group. And it offers the same types of things, monthly meetings, opportunities to network in niche groups that have certain specialties. There are what are called roundtables where you can get together and talk about a specific topic. For example, I'm part of USA 500, and we just, Ashleigh and I actually together launched the Nonprofit Roundtable group, which is a group of 8 to 20 people that get together and talk about nonprofits. And they want to know, they want to learn. These are very seasoned individuals who know very little about nonprofits and how to be engaged. They do small things. They do events or maybe garner some money through event-based fundraising and things like that. But generally speaking, they just don't know a lot about nonprofits and how they work. The main difference, for full transparency, Provisors is about $2,000 per year for membership, but USA 500 is free if you represent a nonprofit. So they look at you as a connector, like a center of influence of sorts, and that can be quite beneficial for them. Again, you're doing them a favor by teaching them about nonprofits, and they're doing you a favor, hopefully, by sending people your way. So that's all about starting new relationships, and it's with businesses and companies and others. There's no shortage of opportunity if you lean into that. All right, so starting new relationships with community foundations. Excuse me, I'm just going to clear my throat here for a second. Okay, so applying for grants. That's a great way to get on a community foundation's radar. So that's just simply saying, go onto the website, apply, get into their database, and get to know them, or they'll get to know you. So that's just putting your data in the system and so on. Getting to know your local senior program officer. So this is just people, again, who are representatives at the community foundation. And what they do is they are either content experts or they are people who are regional representatives. So they might represent the Portsmouth, New Hampshire region, or the Manchester region, or another region, or they might be experts in the environment or helping with kids or veterans or something like that. So you want to get to know those individuals. And if you don't know who they are, sometimes you can, for example, at the New Hampshire Charitable Foundation, you just go onto the website and you look up staff, and you'll see, as you go down the list, you'll see which individuals in the community impact team, for example, are senior program officers for which types of topics or regions. So I think that's important because they want to know you, you want to know them, and then they'll have their eye out to maybe be able to connect you to certain opportunities to receive funding, or maybe they can send information about your organization to potential donors. We have at the New Hampshire Charitable Foundation donor services managers that collect information about nonprofits. And then when a certain topic comes up, or we know a certain donor might be interested in something, we can bring that to the individual and say, hey, have you thought about this? We know you normally support this organization and so on, but this came on our radar screen. What do you think about that? And many times donors say, oh, that's terrific. Thank you. I didn't know that existed, or I didn't know that was out there. So that's a huge service that I think that we provide at community foundations, is bridging the gap, being a bit of a matchmaker whenever possible. So again, senior program officers, super important to know if you can. And then coalitions, what I'll say about that is just, this is something that you can do, not necessarily with community foundations, but the idea of, well, actually, I'll talk about this. So in community foundations, we are in New Hampshire, we're the only statewide community foundation. We're the only community foundation like that. Rhode Island's the same way, Vermont, Maine, statewide community foundations. But there's also lots of community foundations across the country, about 800. So there's opportunities there to share information. We can share information about nonprofits in New Hampshire with other community foundations in other parts of the country. So in that way, it's just saying sharing information out about you is helpful in your organization, because lots of people want to know about that. So just finding ways to, again, advertise your wares, whether it's community foundations or otherwise. I just want to go off in a little bit of a sidebar here around applying for grants. I did reach out to somebody I know who applies for grants regularly. It's her job. And I'll just read a quote here. Again, this doesn't have anything to do with community foundations, but it has more to do with applying for grants. And I said, what's your secret? What's the secret sauce? And she said, well, I do a lot of Googling. And she said, we also have gone down the road of if you don't ask, they won't give motto. So just be aggressive is really what I took away from that. And she said, I also have tried to think outside the box, such as securing a grant or asking for a grant for food pantries. She said, I asked for iPads for each center to complete the inventory. And she said, I ended up getting the grant. So sometimes you're just thinking just slightly outside of the obvious. But her point was just be aggressive, go out there and see what you can find, and be creative whenever possible. All right, continued engagement and gratitude. So I mentioned before, articles, putting articles out there, blog posts, testimonials. What is your narrative? What's your theme? What's your story? What are the main themes and what is your message? So that can be great because you can take people who are donors and feature them in those articles and testimonials. You can get them to tell the story, get to see it from their perspective. You could feature staff. You could feature, again, leadership. There's all kinds of people you can feature to tell the story and engage them and show gratitude in that way. Thank you for telling your story and helping us advertise our message. So that is something I've learned over time, is that people who you least think would be interested in being featured find it flattering. And if you do it tastefully and you show them sometimes a preview of what might be, they are more apt to say, sure, I'll do that. And then it ends up being a big source of pride for them, because then they show their family, they show their friends, and look, I was featured. And it's kind of fun for them after all. And obviously it's huge to tell. It's part of the fabric of your own story at your own institution. So visits, it's probably the most obvious thing on this list. Visiting with people, having a little chat, engaging them, talking to them about the institution, what's new these days, Zoom meetings, if you can't do it in person. I found when I was working at Dartmouth that for example, if somebody was an alum of the medical school or the hospital, or sorry, medical school or the college, I found that I was a portal, especially when I was traveling around the country. I was a portal for information they didn't have. So even though I was there to say thank you for your past giving, I looked at it as most of the visit was just catching them up. Oh, this is what's happening at Dartmouth these days, or what kind of questions do you have? What can I do for you? How can I be helpful to you? And that was hugely valuable. And I do believe that they kept taking my visit because they found it to be enlightening. So that was something that was there. Can you educate? So phone calls, emails, texts, all helpful. Little quick phone call. Hey, I was thinking of you. An email. A text, if some people are responsive to that. Everybody communicates in different ways. So I'd call those, just the bullet down below that says thinking of you touches. Just, hey, I saw this article and I thought of you, or I saw this and I was thinking of you, or this came up and I thought you'd be interested. It doesn't have to be a heavy touch. It's something very light, but I found those to be incredibly effective over time. If somebody reached out to me and said I was thinking of you and showed me something, I'd definitely remember that. So I found that to be effective in my career. And updates, via correspondence. I mentioned that specifically. I work with one individual. She is interestingly only interested in communicating by snail mail. So that's what we do. I send her a letter. She sends me a letter back. It takes a few weeks, but gets the job done. And that's the way she likes to communicate. So just kind of going back to touches, reach out to people in the way they like to be reached out to. Everybody's different. Focus groups. Sometimes a terrific way to engage people is just to say, hey, what's your opinion on this? Or our organization is thinking about doing this. What do you think? And it doesn't have to be a lot of people that you gather, but it could be some of the closest donors that you work with. And they could be flattered that you'd ask their opinion. And if you leave it as just that, say, we're just soliciting for opinions right now, I'm not going to guarantee that we're going to take this and run with it, but I definitely want to know what you think. People love to give their opinions on things, especially if they're passionate about the organization. So it doesn't have to be a massive undertaking. It could be just a few people here and there just to get their opinion. And obviously you can do the same thing with one-on-one visits and such, just, hey, I just want to float this by you. What do you think about this? Or we're going to go in this direction as an organization. What do you think about that? So that's super helpful. Appreciation events. There's nothing like a big thank you event. Again, people are so used to being solicited. Everybody's asking me for money. I'm like a walking ATM, kind of sick of being solicited. So every once in a while, just saying thank you. This is a thank you event. This is just here to appreciate what you have done. We're not soliciting for anything today. We just want to let you know that we appreciate your ongoing loyalty, and we wouldn't be able to do this without you and many people like you. So that goes a long way. And I'll kind of jump down there to the bottom. Thank you call campaign. I remember hearing about campaigns where people are just getting on the phone. Sometimes students, for example, of an educational institution, and just saying, hey, just call and say thank you. And they say, oh, that's so great. Thank you for calling. And then, of course, they engage in a conversation with the student about what are you up to and what are you doing. And believe it or not, sometimes just saying thank you can lead to an unexpected gift because they're just appreciative of the outreach. And then the last thing, just jumping up to the bullet just above that, surveys. Just asking people what they think, giving them, hey, how are we doing so far? What could we improve upon? What do you like best? Where are our gaps? And just being very thoughtful about putting the survey together, not too long, just short enough so that respect people's time, make it easy and maybe even fun for them to give their opinion, and you'd be surprised what you learn. So all of these ways of engagement are different forms of staying connected, but it's also ways of saying thank you and we appreciate you. And you have many choices. You don't have to choose just us. So we appreciate you doing that. And of course, the more engagement you have, respectfully, not annoyingly, but just enough, keeps you top of mind, and it makes it easy for people to refer people to you. All right, I think we're going to pause here for some interactive polls and then just give everybody a moment to ask a question in the chat if they'd like to. So here comes a poll. Do you consider yourself an introvert or an extrovert? Right. All right. So final answer. With like about 10 people consider themselves extroverts on the call today, and 6 are introverts. So I just throw that out there because it depends on, when you think about the outreach that you're doing, a lot of it is extroverted activity, right? You're reaching out, but what are some ways that even introverts can engage and feel like they're connecting with people, even though it's not necessarily their comfort zone, is to do that proactive outreach. So I gave you plenty of opportunities and thoughts in the prior slides. So you can say, well, what do I want to plug into? What feels good for me? Or complement what you're comfortable with somebody who might be a little bit more extroverted, and maybe together you're a dynamic duo and you can go out and do all kinds of great engagement without feeling like you're too far out of your comfort zone and not in your happy place. All right, second question. What is your preferred method of engaging with someone for the very first time? Joan asked me if I'm an introvert or an extrovert. I am definitely an extrovert because I went and I did a test one time, and on a 0 to 10 scale, I was a 10 as far as extrovert. And my wife will definitely tell you that. She'll say, Rick, you just got to get out of the house and meet people. And Ashleigh works very closely with me. I don't think she thinks I'm an introvert at all. But I appreciate when people are introverted. I mean, again, it's harder, but I just can't identify. All right. So top answer was in person. Not surprisingly, people love to meet somebody face to face. You can read a lot about a person, a lot of trust building in that first meeting. And people don't like to use snail mail for the first time. That makes sense. Email might be a nice way to reach out for the first time. Just check in. Phone call, not bad. Zoom, not preferred, but I'll have to say I've had great success with Zoom and Teams in the pandemic because we couldn't see people in person. So the next best thing was just stay connected, reach out, do all the things that are described here: email, phone, Zoom, and occasionally snail mail. Just most important thing, stay connected. All right. So I don't think we have any more polling questions right now. And I don't think do we have anybody with any questions before we proceed? All right. No questions. I never know if that's good or bad. People are just still absorbing or if you're just totally disengaged. But I welcome questions. Keep them coming if you have them. All right. Engagement methods, when to reach out. All right. We touched on this a little bit. So when do you have a one-on-one in person or virtually? First time encounter, we just saw that. It's the preferred methodology for people who are meeting somebody for the first time. You can build rapport, and in future meetings, you're building on prior conversations. And this is a side note for myself. I would try to take copious notes after a meeting with someone, and then I would use those as jumping off points or in ways that I would connect with them through future contact. So if I knew that their child were graduating from college or that they were planning a trip or something like that, I would always try to fold that into future outreach, because it just shows you were paying attention. And it's sometimes a good prompt. If I'm reaching out so many times to so many different people, I may lose track of a lot of the quiet things. So Joan just put something out there around, should you include the person that connected you? If you can, if the person's ready to join you, there's nothing like having a person come with you. That's a huge bonus. But if they can't, obviously reference them and make sure that they know that you appreciate the connection that they'd made. Sometimes circling back and saying, hey, we had a great conversation because of you. Appreciate that. So yeah, it's important to build rapport, trust. How do you build rapport quickly? And building on prior conversations, you've done what you said you were going to do, you followed up, and so on. There's all kinds of different things that you did to keep that relationship strong. So fleshing out the nuances of a proposal, a project, or an initiative. So maybe they're considering something that you put in front of them before. Maybe they're asking you a question. So this is a good time to sit down with somebody and really lay it all out, because it's really hard to do that through email. You can definitely do it through a phone call, but it's really hard through email and definitely snail mail. So just kind of going through so you can have a nice iterative conversation back and forth. They can ask you questions. You can see what concerns them and so on. And obviously that's a really important thing to do, is to make sure you give that some time so they can ask the questions they need. So when do you chat on the phone? Obviously, when a one-on-one's not feasible, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. If you can't see them in person, a phone call can do the trick. In the age of Zoom, sometimes we forget about the phone, but the phone is a nice way to reconnect, the old-fashioned way. Or a short conversation, just following up on something. You have a question for them, quick touch, something, maybe you schedule the phone call versus just calling them out of the blue, or you call them out of the blue and maybe they call you back. But that's nice, just to stay in touch, something quick. They like to hear your voice. People are people, and they like to know that you're a human being and that you're just checking in. Even if you have not a lot to say, or you have something that you just, like I said, you want to follow up on, can be helpful. Now, when do you send physical mail? Okay, when you're laying out the details, somebody likes to read it all. They want to have it in front of them. When they've insisted upon mail versus email, that happened to me. People respect the channel people want to use. If people want to use mail, you use mail. People want to use email, you use email. If they want to talk on the phone, you talk on the phone. If they want to see you in person, you try to see them in person. That sounds all very obvious, but sometimes we don't do that. We sort of like, my preferred method is this. And so you keep reaching out to the person that way and they're not responding, or they respond very little. It doesn't work. So try to follow the channel that people want. And in this case, I'm mentioning mail versus email. And then when the quality of the visual is something you want to control, you want really good photos, there's charts that you don't think would translate very well through email or through, anything like that, then you'd want to send it through the physical mail if you can. And sometimes older people just prefer physical mail. They like to touch it. It's the reason people like to read books versus read something online. They just like to feel it, touch it. It's just part of the way they gather information. So that's important. So again, respect the channel that people ask you to respect. And I had this listed as its own slide because I alluded to it just now, but I can't tell you how many times people say, all right, I tried to reach out. I sent emails to all these professional advisors, or I sent all these emails out to all these potential donors or all these donors. Nobody's getting back to me. Well, maybe you have the wrong email address, or maybe they're inundated with emails, but I wouldn't follow an email with another email necessarily. I mean, I might once, but then I stop. Like, why would I keep doing that? Why would I keep going in the same channel? Then I mix it up. I make a phone call. I send something snail mail or something like that. Or I can't stress that enough, because I feel like people think, well, if I just keep doing the same one form of outreach, it'll work. And it's like, no, you have to mix it up. Everybody communicates differently, and you never know why they're not responding to you. It also could be a timing issue. It could be on vacation. I mean, I'm sure we've all had situations, and Ashleigh and I chuckle about this sometimes, where you send an email out and then 6 months later, somebody gets back to you and says, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I'm just answering emails now. And here's the answer to your question. You just think, well, probably could have been a better way than email to reach this person, or maybe it was a timing issue. So anyway, just emphasize that as much as I can, that mix up your forms of outreach. Try different means of engagement when you're reaching out. So asking for more, this is a very uncomfortable thing for people, but my impression is people are, when they have been stewarded sufficiently and appropriately, it's not as hard as you think to ask for more. So let's start at the top here. Funders must know how the original dollars were spent, either on a high level or specific to their gift. That's just respect. That's just saying, hey, you gave us money in the past, really appreciate it. This is what we did with it. This is how it had made an impact. And what do you think about that? People just love to hear those stories, whether it's scholarship for students or helping something in a very small way, or obviously in a very large way. They just want to know. They want the feedback, because otherwise what happens is they're just solicited. They never hear the story. They never know if their gift has made any impact. And they're just viewed as an income source and not as a human being who has true and deep interest in your organization. So letting them know how you spent past dollars, either again, at the high level or specific to what they did, is extremely important. So ideally, in the original conversations, you're building context for a follow-up ask. So that is really important, because sometimes I think about it as, here's what we're talking about today, but let me give you a bigger picture of where we're going as an institution, and letting them know that what they're doing now is helpful for today, but there's also future need, and there will be a future need. So that's important. And just speaking to what Michaela just posted in the chat here, she said having the right tools and information makes all the difference. So that can be helpful, just to have those. Not a 10 out of 10 extrovert like myself, right? Yeah, so just having different things that you can do to build context and help people understand what they did and then what might be next. So third bullet there, funders are usually happy to be asked if they feel like the original dollars were well spent. Okay, so they don't mind being asked. And something I'll say too is that when you get the quote unquote over the transom gift or the surprise gift, it's usually not, it shouldn't be a total surprise to you. It's because they're so happy with the way things have been done in the past that they'll either respond to your ask and they will usually maybe surprise you or whatever. They'll give you some dollars that you didn't expect. It's because they're just so pleased. And I'll have to say too that I'm not really going to go into too much detail about this, but people sometimes are afraid of asking for more, like a higher dollar level. If you know your audience and you know what you think you know what their capacity level might be, then you're gauging your ask appropriately. People don't necessarily mind being asked for a little bit more or a little bit out of what would feel like the comfortable range, because you're asking from a place of need, or you're trying to be proactive in the sense of, I'm letting you know, Mr. and Mrs. Donor, what we're trying to accomplish. People will appreciate that. They won't feel like you're overreaching. They won't feel like it's inappropriate if you come from a place of conviction in what you're talking about, and that you have the best interests of the institution in mind. They'll tell you if they can't do it, and they'll give you what they can give you, but they'll appreciate at least you giving them the big picture. And that leads into the next part. Having the funders understand strategy and tactics in context is incredibly important. They're investing into the institution. They care about it. It's not a transaction. It's not like, okay, we need you to fund this now. Okay, goodbye, we'll come back later. It should feel like they understand where you're going. They are investors. They have a desire to see what success looks like. And so telling them what the big picture looks like, and then how you're going about as an institution trying to fulfill the mission is very important. It's a huge takeaway for people. All right, let's move into the mindset of a high capacity donor. And what I'm going to do is we'll go through the slide, and then if we have a little time, I'm just going to tell a few stories about people and just just sort of capture why I think we had success together because of just things that happened as far as relating to their mindset. So the mindset of a high capacity donor who thinks strategically. So think about the reasons that individuals would want to contribute large sums of money to you. I think what happens is too often people will gather together thinking about who our constituency is or who our potential donors could be. And they think of the highest capacity donors that they know of, and they put those names onto a piece of paper. And they say, oh, I'm sure this person would definitely want to give to our organization. Why? Because they happen to have high capacity, they happen to have large sums of money. Well, remember, these people are being solicited all the time. They have so many different organizations that are soliciting them. You are not the only ones. And what are you doing to, again, going down to the bullet there, strategy, larger context? What are you doing to talk about that with these individuals? You know, just because they have the money doesn't necessarily mean they want to give it to you. So what is the problem in society that the donor is trying to solve? Do you know that? Are you in a place where you would be able to give them something higher level than what your organization is trying to do? So if the problem is homelessness, then it's your organization plus maybe many other organizations that are helping to solve that problem. And that could be locally, but then there might be a national conversation as well, or there might be some statistics or research. So that is extremely powerful to people who are high capacity donors thinking strategically, you are really educating them about something. And you're also looking at the problem that as it's larger than what your institution might be able to solve. That's very, very powerful. So if you can speak to how your institution fits into that mix, even better, right? So let's talk about this. And I'm thinking of one particular donor who sort of makes me smile, because she said she works in marketing. That's her profession. And she said, I'm a right brain person. I like stories. I like thinking about people and so on. And then she said, when it came to nonprofits and impact, I realized I'm a left brain person. I like statistics. I actually like both. I like to hear the stories, but I also like to know, what did this institution do? What were they doing to be part of the solution and show me some results? So what you can do is you can look at materials where institutions have done this well. And right off the top of my head, I can think of the Upper Valley Haven up in the northern part of New Hampshire, this sort of, I guess, the west central part of New Hampshire. They are very good at doing that, left brain, right brain. And I also feel like the New Hampshire Food Bank is very good at that. In particular, they just balance that out well, tell stories about people, and they show the impact that they've been making as an institution toward the problem of food scarcity. Or in the case of the Upper Valley Haven, people were temporarily or permanently displaced from their homes and the troubles that they're going through, and how Upper Valley Haven gave them a leg up. So it's very compelling stuff. And I'll have to say, I'm sort of the cynical fundraiser, right? The cynical development person. And when I see materials that grab me, I feel like those must be pretty good materials, because it caught my eye. And sometimes I save them as reminders of really good work. So I just want to mention that is right brain, left brain, try to mix it up, and think about the bigger picture. Think about the societies, the problem that you're trying to address, or your institution is trying to address, and go up a level or two, and try to be a good ambassador and educator in that way. So also loyalty to the institution. What are their personal ties? Just again, don't assume that just because they have capacity that they want to give to you. So maybe the family receives some services from you. That's quite powerful. I've seen some incredibly large gifts just based on that, almost like a thank you gift. And then helping society in the way that they can say, and we can fund something of means that can also help other families, just like this institution helped our family. Maybe they volunteered there, and they got to see the place from the inside out, and it was quite touching and powerful to them. So that might be why they want to help. Maybe their family members work in that field. I met a couple whose daughter works in the NICU unit. And so the family became very enamored with the idea of helping preemies and making sure that they thrive. So that can be quite powerful to want to be able to give back. And again, they're not just looking at that one particular organization. They might be looking at what the organization is doing as part of something larger. And then prior generations had ties to the institution or what it stands for. No question, with Dartmouth College, we talk about bleeding green, people who bleed green. Their loyalty is there because their grandfather went to Dartmouth, their mother went to Dartmouth, maybe their kids go to Dartmouth, great-grandfather went to Dartmouth. You can't put a price on that. That is just so powerful. They're so proud and just want to stay close to the institution and what it means to them and their family. All right, so just a little bit of a sidebar here. A high capacity individual donor doesn't just have cash, okay? They have lots of other types of assets, but rarely do nonprofits ask questions related to other types of assets outside of cash, in my opinion. So I'll just mention this. You can ask people, do you know about the opportunity in non-cash giving? Have you ever thought about assets beyond cash? Worst case scenario, they'll say, yes, I have thought about it and I'm not interested. Best case scenario, they say, no one's ever asked me about that before. Tell me more. So you can say, well, you can make gifts of real estate. Granted, they're a lot more complicated, but that could be a $500,000 gift that somebody's making because they have some asset like real estate that they don't need, or if they sold it, it would incur capital gains. They don't know how to dispose of it. Maybe their kids don't want it. They don't want to sell it, like I mentioned. And so maybe donating it is a great option. Closely held stock, otherwise known as privately held stock, also publicly traded stock. I can't tell you how many times I've talked to a high capacity donor and they don't think about that. They have these types of assets, they have stock, but no one's ever asked them about it. So they don't think about it as a means of giving. So asking about other types of assets beyond cash can be an interesting door opener. Life insurance, people can donate the ownership of a life insurance policy to an institution, or they can just simply donate essentially the cash value, where they would donate the policy and then the institution would just cash out the policy and take the net proceeds of a permanent life insurance policy. That happens. People weigh the pros and cons. Should I keep it intact and give the institution my death benefit, or should I just give them the cash now? So that happens. That comes up, especially with older life insurance policies that have been around for like 40 years. That's a common thing. How do I, what should I do with this life insurance policy? Intangible personal property. I'm putting together a PowerPoint right now with a representative from an institution that her company deals exclusively with what might be called passion assets. So these are art, jewelry, collectibles, baseball card collections, things like that. Just things that just could run the gamut of assets that people have. That are they going to sell it? Are they going to give it to a kid or an heir? Or are they going to donate it? Kind of almost boils down to those three choices. Almost never is anyone ever asking people, what do you think you're going to do with that asset? Or if they're sitting in someone's living room and noticing some beautiful things and commenting on it, you never know if those assets could be something they would actually consider donating in the future. So now this is all to say that I completely understand if your institution wants to run away from these types of assets because it is not something that your institution would take in. It scares everyone to death to be able to entertain anything like that. Partner with other institutions like community foundations like ours. We take in such assets and we put them into funds. What we would do is we take it in, we would sell it, and then we would put it
Oh, looks like we might have lost Rick. Hold on. Bear with us. Oh, you're back, Rick. You just unmute yourself.
Thank you. Sorry about that. So I just wanted to mention that because that's something that's completely overlooked, and a lot of people's assets are in the form of non-cash, which is not something people prefer to give money in the means of cash, but then they don't necessarily give non-cash. they have the smallest amount of money usually they have in cash, but that's what they go to first. But the largest amount of money might be in the form of non-cash, but it's not something they consider. So, right. So next slide, please. All right, before we do the summary, if there are no questions, I just want to buzz through some high capacity donor stories where I'll just give you some quick hits, basically. So one individual that I'm thinking of, she gave because she was interested in giving back because her husband received services or received treatment, and was extremely thankful. And that's exactly what she did. She wanted to know what the societal issue was. Was there an institution in the area that provided services on a larger scale. And as it turned out, there was a need to expand the type of service that her husband had received. So she ended up making a donation that created a standalone building that was the impetus behind something that was providing a need within that particular area. And as it turned out, it was related to palliative and hospice care services. So, so that was fantastic. So again, thinking of something that's bigger than what happened with her husband, more just what do people need in the area. I'm thinking of another donor who she was interested in anti-hate groups. She was very concerned about racial justice and wondering who's talking to audiences about racial justice and bias and so on. So she wanted to fund organizations that would either support people who would come and speak on that topic, excuse me, or she wanted to fund something that would provide dollars so that those nonprofit institutions could then take those funds and hire individuals to come in and speak to their nonprofits about such topics. So again, something larger than the gift is really what I'm driving at here. She was looking at it as this is a start, maybe a proof of concept. I start with something and I move into something larger. Maybe it catches fire and other people do it. Thinking of another donor who was interested in bridging the opportunity gap as it relates to kids. And so their focus was, he and his wife focused on early childhood education and also just helping families, and did not have a specific nonprofit in mind, but just felt like wanted to give to that particular niche and then have whatever nonprofits were doing good work in that space, that's what they wanted to fund. And in this situation, it was $1 million. So it was $500,000 toward education. I'm sorry, to early childhood education, and the dollars was to help support families. And again, the feedback, going back to things we talked about, going back and telling the story was huge. So this is a terrible time for that to happen. Another one I want to mention, an individual who was concerned about getting high school graduates or people who are looking for careers matched with employers who are offering careers. And so that was a bigger issue, retention of employees, teaching people how to get to the jobs that they're most suited for. So again, big picture, and then giving to nonprofits that fit that category was the way this particular individual and her husband were thinking. Another one, what's one of my favorite stories, is a couple that is concerned about scholarship as it relates to not necessarily four-year schools or two-year schools, but more the trades. So how do we get people who want to be a welder or a plumber or a carpenter or somebody who's technically more specialized? If there's a need in society, how do we make sure we give those individuals the funds to be able to get the education that they need to go out and fulfill those jobs? Not unrelated to what I was just talking about around matching individuals to employers, but this is specific to the trades. So that was very visionary, I thought, on this particular couple's part. And it's just really totally caught fire. And other people, other high net worth individuals who also think strategically are captivated by that concept and are really leaning into it. And I think it can attract some serious dollars in the future and will continue to. And then maybe the last one is more about a couple who made their money locally with a business in one particular area of New Hampshire, and they wanted to set up a fund so that other people could put money into it that would help that same geography. So they were thinking, again, how do we help this town? And we want to give back. We're thankful. We're successful business owners. We owe everything to the local community. How can we help the community? and how can other people help us help the community? So that's what excited them. So in all those situations, you can see there's a bigger problem to solve. And these individuals were stepping forward because they saw that there was a solution, and then they wanted to come forward and be able to give their dollars to help alleviate that problem or address that problem. And then obviously then giving to specific nonprofits that help to solve that problem. So again, can't say enough about the idea of give people the 30,000 foot view, give them the 50,000 foot view if you can, and then drill down to how your particular institution is helping to solve the problem. So just wrapping up here in the final slide, a summary. So we talked about starting new relationships. There's all kinds of different ways that you can reach out, find people, how people can find you, how can you be present. It's a very intentional thing to try to reach out to new constituencies. And at the same time, don't forget about the constituency that's already working with you. So continued engagement. How do you make them feel connected through all kinds of different means that we talked about? Express gratitude. Remember, people feel there's a phrase called donor fatigue. They get tired of being asked. They want to feel like they're appreciated. And if they're just feeling like people are soliciting them all the time, it gets old after a while. So take the extra step, go the extra mile to make them understand how much you truly appreciate them and what they're doing. You almost can't say it enough. So engagement methods, we talked about when to reach out. What are some entry points or some touch points, ways to show that you're present and you're staying engaged. You're not quiet, silent, and you're not overly aggressive either, just annoying with email after email after email. What are you doing to try to find that balance, the mix of touches, the different ways that you can stay engaged with them? Obviously, focusing on what they are most appreciative of as far as the specific engagement method. Asking for more, again, being intentional, having conviction, understanding the strategy of how your institution is trying to get to where it's going, and also the tactical ways to get there. That will give you conviction to get to places you never thought you would, and it doesn't feel transactional. And I can't state that enough. You just try to rise above the transactional feel of whatever that engagement looks like and try to move into something that feels more substantive, to the point where honestly people will say, thank you. I appreciate you bringing this opportunity to me. I feel like I'm making a difference. It's very satisfying to me. You have connected me to something that I wouldn't have found on my own. And when that happens, you feel like it's nirvana for all parties, right? You're like, oh, of course, I'm happy that you're engaged in this way. But they can sometimes get even more satisfaction than you are in working in that way. So asking for more can come from a deliberate ask, and it can also come from an amazing amount of good stewardship. And then lastly, the mindset of the high capacity donor. So people who think strategically, want to solve a societal problem. Your institution is part of that solution, but it's not the only solution. Okay, it could be one of 15 or 20 different institutions that they want to support. But if you do a good job of showing them what that looks like and educating them and helping them understand, the sky's the limit. People will be infinitely appreciative and look to you as truly a leader in that space, and will gravitate toward you and what you're teaching them. So with that, we have a few more minutes for questions here. So just starting at the top, it just mentioned about stock type donations. Yes, the New Hampshire Charitable Foundation does take in different types of stock donations. We take it in at the appraised value or at the fair market value. We sell it, and we take the net proceeds and put them into a fund usually, or just provide the proceeds in a different kind of way. Also, any ideas for hosting an engaging appreciation event for sponsors and donors? I wouldn't necessarily recommend separate events. I think if you tell great stories, both sponsors and donors and anybody else is going to show up and just be wowed by the impact that you're making. So, these days it could have been a Zoom appreciation event, or, as we move toward more in-person stuff, just think about how you can knock people out with their first in-person event in 14 months. What would you do to showcase the great things that you're doing? Just addressing Kirk's question here. Do you find major donors want or need a more detailed general organization business document, or will they ask for the information they're interested in? I think it's a combination of both. I think a few different things. A very high level flagship piece is great if you have that. Just here's us at 30,000 feet. Also, here's specific initiatives or things that we're doing so you can spoon feed people information, which kind of plays to the last part of Kirk's question. Will they ask for information they're interested in? Yes, but you also want to be able to provide them with something that's right-sized to their ask. For example, I've learned over the years, if someone says, I just have this very specific question, you don't want to give them the farm. Here's everything about the institution you ever want to know. If you do that, you better direct them to page 14 or page 15 so they know exactly that you're addressing their question instead of making them do all this extra work. So I'd say it's both being proactive, having the information and materials ready, and it's also being, when you're reactive, what would you provide them? Would you provide them a link to a page? Would you provide them a PDF of something? And I'm a big fan of something small, something specific is better than, hey, read all of our materials, read everything, because they're not going to do that. They're just going to feel like, what, do you just do this for everybody? You just give them, every single piece of material that you have. People are overwhelmed with materials. They just want to be pointed in the right direction. So you can do them a service by simply answering their question with something that your institution already has on file or something that you've curated for them.
Rick, do you have a place or a website so for smaller nonprofits who've never even thought about accepting non-cash donations, like where they could go to learn more about that before they started like partnering with the Charitable Foundation, for example, just to be like, how would they even think about like starting to do that?
Starting to curate material. Chances are they're not going to be able to do it, but if you're asking how can people learn about how to do it,
yeah.
If people want to email me, I can send them to specific sites or things that they can learn. I don't want to, you can teach people in ways that are sort of like, this is public information about it, or even better, you can put something on your website that's just high level things. And I can even send a link to what we do, which is just, here's some of the things we take in. I'll have to say most of the time, people just want to talk to somebody about it. If they have a gift of closely held stock, they'll want to have a chat. They won't want to necessarily read about it, because even if they read about it, they're going to think like, oh, I have very specific questions to me that I'd like you to answer. So I'd say it's a jumping off point to say we take these types of gifts in, but then to say, all right, now you want to get into the dirty details. Let me bring in a specialist to help walk you through it. Almost 100% of the time, people want to have a chat about it versus doing all the research on their own. So I don't know if that answers your question. All right, we're right at time. So I guess I'm done.
Well, thank you so much to Rick and Ashleigh for being with us today. That was a super informative presentation. So thank you so much.